week 31, chapter 5. Let's see what they're going to do now. Okay, the sheep made Sarah smile. She sank her fingers into the thick, coarse wool, and she talked to them, running with the lambs and letting them suck on her fingers. She named them after her favorite aunts, Harriet, Maddie, and Lou. She lay down in the field beside them and sang "Summer is a Comin' In," her voice drifting off over the meadow grass carried by the wind. She cried when we found a lamb that had died, and she shouted and shook her fists at the turkey buzzards that came from nowhere to eat it. She would not let Caleb or me come near. And that night, Papa went out with a shovel to bury the sheep and a lantern to bring Sarah back. She sat on the porch alone, and Nick crept in to lean against her knees. After dinner, Sarah drew pictures to send home to Maine. She began a charcoal drawing of the fields rolling like the sea. She drew sheep whose ears were too big, and she drew a windmill. "Windmill was my first word," said Caleb. "Papa told me so." "Mine was flower," I said. "What was yours, Sarah?" "Dune," said Sarah. "Dune?" Caleb looked up. "In Maine," said Sarah, "there are rock cliffs that rise up at the edge of the sea, and there are hills covered with pines and spruces and green needles. But William and I found sand dunes on our own. It was soft and sparkling with bits of mica. And when we were little, we would slide down the dune into the water." So a dune is like a small sand hill that's like right by the water. Okay? Caleb looked out the window. "We have no dunes here," he said. Papa stood up. "Yes, we do," he said. He took the lantern and went out the door. "We do?" Caleb called after him. He ran ahead, Sarah and I following, the dogs close behind. Next to the barn was Papa's mound of hay for bedding, nearly half as tall as the barn, covered with a canvas to keep the rain from rotting it. Papa carried the wooden ladder from the barn and leaned it against the hay. "There," he smiled at Sarah, "our dune." Sarah was very quiet. The dogs looked up at her, waiting. Seal brushed against her leg, her tail in the air. Caleb reached over and took her hand. "It looks high up," he said. "Are you scared, Sarah?" "Scared?" "Scared!" exclaimed Sarah. "You bet I'm not scared." She climbed up the ladder, and Nick began to bark. She climbed to the very top of the hay and sat, looking down at us. Above all, the stars were coming out. Papa piled a bed of loose hay with his pitchfork, and the light of the lantern made his eyes shine when he smiled up at Sarah. "Fine?" asked Papa. "Fine," said Sarah, and she lifted her hands above her head and slid down into the soft hay. She lay laughing, and as the dogs rolled beside her. "Was it a good dune?" asked Caleb. "Yes," said Sarah. "It's a fine dune." Caleb and I climbed up and slid down, and so did Sarah 3 more times. At last, Papa slid down too, as the skies grew dark and the stars blinked like fireflies. We were covered with hay and dust, and we sneezed. In the kitchen, Caleb and I washed in a big wooden tub, and Sarah drew more pictures to send to William. One was of Papa, his curly hair full of hay. She drew Caleb sitting down, sliding down the hay with his arms like Sarah's over his head. And she drew a picture of me in the tub, my hair long and straight and all wet. She looked at her drawing of the field for a long time. "Something's missing," she told Caleb. "Something. And then she put it away. "Dear William," said Sarah, reading to us by lantern that night, "sliding down our dune of hay is almost as fine as sliding down the dune of dunes into the sea." Caleb smiled at me across the table. He said nothing, but his mouth formed the word I had heard too: our dune. So, do the chapter 5 right that goes with it, and have a great day.